So let's get into the Wander notes, and this should be the conclusion. We have 2.5 pages. This will be the last reading together of this formally. After this, we'll go into the Healing and Balance PDF next week. So, Section D, Higher Density Evolution, page 10, point 1, which is positive, negative, 4D, 5D, work in consciousness. This is, really interesting, and again, you can compare it to other channels and your own sense of where you're from or where you're going, and in relation to our human experience in 3D. So, introduction, Ross says, there's very little work in consciousness in 4D and 5D compared to the work done in 3D. The work that is accomplished in fourth density positive is that work whereby the positive social memory complex, having through slow stages harmoniously integrated itself, goes forth to aid those of less positive orientation which seek their aid. Their service is their work, and through this dynamic between the societal self and others, which are the object of love, greater and greater intensities of understanding or compassion are attained. This intensity continues until the appropriate intensity of the light may be welcomed. This is fourth density harvest. In fourth density positive, there are minor amounts of catalyst of spiritual and mental complex distortion. This occurs during the process of harmonizing to the extent of forming the social memory complex. This causes some small catalyst and work to occur, but the great work of fourth density is the contact betwixt the societal self and less polarized others. And so let me explain these two, and then we'll go further. It's interesting that in fourth and fifth density in general, the work is not as intense and is considered less than what we are doing here, or what 3D souls do in third density, or what's done in this dimension. Fourth density positive first forms a social memory complex, harmonious integration, and that takes a bit of time. It doesn't happen right away. It's basically a kind of collective mind meld, where the information and the past experiences of one is available to all. They retain a sense of distinction, but they also know themselves as part of a unified group mind. It's not exactly a hive, and it's not exactly a pod. It's not an animal analogy. It's not, however, full soul fusion or full soul joining in absolute oneness, because it's fourth density, not sixth. Fourth is still aware of duality, which means the consciousness of fourth chakra, heart chakra, is quite dualistic. I love you. I want to be loving. Love is good. All these are dualistic notions. Unity is basically non-dual love. So sixth dimension, true sixth dimension and higher self is non-dual love, in the sense that realization of the oneness of all, which is the law of one, realization of the oneness of all naturally has compassion, or naturally feels loving kindness or lovingness beyond the sense of wanting to be loving, beyond the sense of intention, but in the condition of being. The condition of awareness of oneness, which is awareness of reality. It's not made up oneness. It's not an experience of oneness, and it's an experience of reality. And reality is one. We are one. In Lakesh, I am another you, other self, self and other self. That experience, that opening of consciousness to reality in sixth density or sixth chakra naturally is in peace with all, and that is felt. That's a higher order of love. In fourth density and fourth chakra, there's still a sense of me and you. Fourth density is not a heck of a lot different than third. Although there's no veil, there still may be technology. There usually is, certainly in the beginning. And there still is a sense of, body and place and work of growth, of change and transformation. In fifth and sixth, the sense of change and transformation becomes exceedingly subtle. And this is like higher meditation. It's hard to know where you are, what you are in higher meditation. The sense of a body falls away, the sense of a mind, separate mind, or mind elements even can fall away. And yet there's continued development. And Ra will explain this a little bit in subsequent paragraphs here. But the work of fourth density, positive, after forming social memory complex, is mainly going forth to aid those of less positive orientation. Mainly, what the Ra says, the great work of fourth density is this contact between the societal self, the unified social memory complex, as unified as fourth density permits, and they're working, their contact with less polarized others, which means third density, which means 3D worlds in which there is polarity, although 60% of 3D planets are positive. Ross said 60% positive, 30% mixed, 10% negative. So the 90% of planets that are positive and or mixed with positive are generally contacted by fourth density positive, not fifth and sixth, although they do some part. With wanderers are generally sent from fifth and sixth. Now the wanderers here are indigo children, double-bodied fourth density, first-timers, newcomers, are not technically wanderers in a sense because they're not going home. This is home. This is the new home, and they're waiting for the derelicts to get thrown out, or for the negative forces to be unable to stand the light and go off into another 3D world to wait it out and come back later, unfortunately, when 3D resumes. And so fourth density positive finds that their service is their work. And that's the dynamic between their group and other third density groups. And perhaps even other fourth density groups that are less polarized or an earlier stage of fourth density positive. That's possible too. But what's interesting is, Ra uses the term small catalyst in the second paragraph there, that harmonizing and forming social memory complex is not a lot of catalyst, because everybody is loving and kind and they see each other's truth and there are no secrets and everybody knows exactly where the others are, and they meld quite naturally, but it takes a bit of time, slow stages. And then they do whatever kind of service they can, beaming love, or incarnating as wanderers, or sending information. I'm not sure what other types of methods, types of working they do with 3D. The Pleiadians, through Billy Meyer, are clearly fourth density positive, in my estimation. And that's, a real contact. Part of their work is supporting the rest of the Confederation in balancing the Earth's energy grid, which also, again, is another element of maintaining the parameters of free will, keeping the planet from wobbling or getting damaged, so that more souls can continue to evolve for longer. There's also direct contact, and then there's basically neutralizing by love transfer, love projection, energy projection, neutralizing Orion, 4D negative, that also seeks to be involved in the 3D scene. So this is called the war in heaven, or what Ra calls, the Armageddon, the real work of the portion of Armageddon that's invisible is war in heaven, but it's not quite war. It's basically around the fourth density fields of the Earth, where Orion sends their thoughts and their energies, and fourth density positive groups counter it with beaming of love and neutralization, and that's a difficult job, actually. That's part of what fourth density positive groups do. In 4D negative, much work is accomplished during the fighting for position, which precedes the period of social memory complex. They have a harder time. There are opportunities to polarize negatively by control of others. That's the name of the game. During the social memory complex period of fourth density negative, the situation is the same. Work takes place through the societal reaching out to less polarized others in order to aid in negative polarization. So they're helping too. That's a form of service. Their service is teaching those who seek service to self how to form the elite and enslave the rest. That's all. That's what it is. So from a detached philosophic level, it's straightforward. And again, Ra's dividing their work, the fourth density work, in terms of pre and post formation of social memory complex. So there's a lot of work during the fighting for position. But the pecking order is established pretty clearly, pretty quickly, because there's no veil. So everybody sees, and they do, light battles. It's all war, war, war. And how interesting it is that, the basis of video game industry is war, right? Warrior, this, that, and the other thing. And unfortunately, it's also crept into the New Age literature. So spiritual warrior. But, in this world, it's hard to be a delicate snowflake. It's hard to be a little child in innocence while there are, snakes around. So Jesus said, "Be ye as innocent as doves and as clever as snakes." And that's interesting. It's really saying that in terms of fourth chakra, innocence and purity, be ye as a child. Purity, innocence, loveliness. Right? Fourth chakra is lovely. It appreciates nature deeply, appreciates others' happiness deeply. It wishes all well always. It comforts. It accepts. It welcomes. It's kindly, gentle. Fifth chakra, however, is a little bit different, and as clever as snakes. It is part of the training here. It's a big piece of work, and we can thank the negativity for that. We can thank the Illuminati and 4D negative for helping us develop wisdom and become clever, because Jesus was no dupe, nor was Buddha, nor our masters, nor is the Confederation, nor are fourth density beings in their own dimension, although they're gaining wisdom. So again, fourth density relates to fourth chakra, so you can see service is their work. After formation of social memory complex, service, positive or negative. In fifth density, 5D positive and negative, the concept of work done through a potential difference is not particularly helpful, as fifth density entities are intensifying rather than potentiating. That's an interesting distinction, and takes a little bit of reflection to figure out. What does that mean? Work done, intensifying rather than potentiating. The concept of work done through a potential difference. Well, I think it's not that hard. You can see that the potential difference is between fourth density positive and fourth density negative and 3D. 3D groups, 3D souls that are not as positive or negative. And that's the potential difference. The difference is the gap in consciousness and the gap in power, or degree of manifestation of infinite power. meaning power is infinite, divine will, the power of the infinite creator, intelligent energy. That's what is. That's the vibrating portion of what is. And the potential of that between 4D and 3D is significant. That's the means by which fourth density evolves, which is interesting. And that's, love, or love of self, which is, fake love. That's why negatives think they're positive, because they're working from a base of confused love, or 4D negative. So that's why the New World Order and the negative folks think they're good, because they think they're helping, because they're working from a tangled fourth chakra. Not more. They may have wisdom, they may be doing magic, 5 and 6, but they're moving into 4D negative if they can. And that's contorted love, selfish love, which is not love at all. And so work done through the potential is not helpful in fifth density. Fifth density entities intensify, and Ra will explain, or we can unpack that as we go further. 5D positive. Fifth density complex, meaning social memory complex, uses sixth density. Teach learners, right? Ra puts those terms together always, different terms. Uses sixth density teachers, let's say, to study more illuminated understandings of unity, thus becoming more and more wise. Fifth density positive social memory complexes choose to divide their service to others in two ways. 1. Beaming of light to creation. 2. Sending of groups to be of aid as instruments of light, such as those whom you are familiar with through channels. Meaning they could send wanderers who become channels, although I don't know if there are so many wanderers, fifth density positive wanderers are channels. They could be sending members of their group to be transmitting information through channels. That's, I believe, what Ra's referring to. Groups that are instruments of light, sending light, potentially channels, I guess, but I would imagine more that they are either wanderers bringing wisdom, right? Like a lot of the wisdom bringers, Tesla. Was Tesla 4th, 5th, or 6th? Well, he could be 5 or 6, I would think. So, like Wilhelm Reich, maybe was 5th or 6th. I would believe so. So they then send groups as a group, sending information from fifth density or from the higher planes of a third density planet, right, as sources of channeling or received information. Or they send wanderers who either become channels or teachers. And then also beam light to creation from their own station. Beaming of light to creation is similar to those, but a level up from those great temples that you see in some visionary art. The sparkling temple on the lake or in the air, or in the forest or in the mountain or on the mountain or in the clouds. Where joyous beaming of love light is done to all creation. In fourth density, it's more devotion, love. In fifth, it would be more light, appreciation, kind of knowing, sensing oneness. And so fifth density positive uses sixth density teachers. They're understanding unity, the oneness of consciousness, how consciousness is all. Seth material is fifth or sixth density positive, and very much talks about the exploration of consciousness revealing unity. Fifth density negative, interestingly, fifth, in 5D negative, service to self has become extremely intense, and self has shrunk or compacted, so the dialogues with teachers are used exclusively in order to intensify wisdom. There are very, very few 5D negative wanderers. They fear forgetting. There are very, very few 5D Orion members, 5D negative. They no longer perceive any virtue in others or themselves. This is a funny phrase, I thought. Higher level negatives really don't care about people, of course. But 5D negative particularly realizes that they're beginning to realize that self is all. What they can't yet handle is that love is that the oneness of self being all naturally means that their enemies are themselves and that they are all, and that there's really no separation between self and other. And so they're shrinking, compacting back into mind as all, not realizing that mind is not mind, meaning mind is not a separate mind, right? Their mind is a portion of the all mind, which is the one mind, which leads to a realization of no individual selfhood, or one self being all, which is developed in sixth density, which then is the end of their line, meaning, I can't be service to self anymore. I can't be separate because mind is one mind and one mind is all, and all means I'm not separate from anything. And wow, that doesn't feel tight and contracted anymore. That feels pretty expansive and formless, and that's the transfer to the positive path in sixth density. And so 5D negative, however, has not gotten to that point yet. Extremely intense service to self, dialogues with teachers, upper 5D negative teachers. Raw Contact had a 5D negative black magician or magic worker basically trying to kill Carla or disorder her mind or the group's mind, individual minds, make her walk in front of a car, lead her heart to having a heart attack. And in the end, he probably was effective in influencing Dawn to suicide. So anyway, that's 5D negative. Very intense, and eventually they'll realize oneness. I'm going to read this last section here, and then we can have questions. Guardians on the next octave. This octave density, meaning what we are in now, 7 dimensions, this octave density is both the omega and alpha, the spiritual mass of the infinite universes becoming one central sun or creator again. Actually, that's the next octave. Then is born a new universe, new infinity, new logos, which incorporates all the creator has experienced of itself. In this new octave, there are also those who wander. Those are 8th density. We know very little across the boundary, the octave boundary, except these beings come to our aid in our octave in its logos completion. Okay, this octave density, meaning each octave density, well, I think they're really saying 8th. I think they're saying 8th density, the beginning of the next set of 7. It's interesting that octave means 8. But a realm, an octave has 7 dimensions. I've pondered that a little bit. I think it is because it's like the musical scale. Before you finish one scale, you sort of go back to where you started. So there's a duplication. So the 7 is 8. It's a strange thing. I mean, maybe the 7 becomes 1, and that 1 is added to the 7 to become 8. I don't know. There's a strange mathematics there, or there's a metaphysics to it. So anyway, the octave density 8th is an alpha omega, the mass, spiritual mass, which is not physical mass, it's energy mass, of the infinite universes, becoming one central sun or creator again. You got to realize that what we see with our eyes as terms of planets and stars and galaxies is just a 3D vision. The 7-dimensional view of all that is pretty enormous and really is an infinity of form and formless. And so after that's done, or when mind or consciousness, it's really beyond consciousness actually, but when totality, entity totality, surpasses itself, a new infinity is born. New universe, new infinity, new logos, incorporating all the Creator's experience of itself in the previous logos, in the previous octave. In the new octave, there are also those who wander. They're called guardians. And they assist with, Ra talks about the precise emissions of light love needed to help souls, meaning body, mind, spirit complexes, in tandem with their higher self, graduate to the next density or be transferred across density boundary to a placement appropriate for next density experience if they're harvested. So the guardians of 8th density, those are really high guys. They're like cosmic Buddhas. Adi Buddha, ADI, Adi Buddhas. They're, they're big fellows. They provide some kind of light emission, light love emission of energy that, think of intricate laser surgery, or precise bursts of light that allow the entirety of a body, mind, spirit complex managed by higher self, along with a higher self's energy field itself, to transmute appropriately for higher density incarnation. The higher self energy field itself also changes or needs to be upgraded as a portion of its being, projected as body, mind, spirit complex, is upgraded in composition. Forget about consciousness for the time being, but just in energy, light, vibratory complex, to be appropriately suited for incarnation in a higher density. So that's a big deal. And it's something that higher self needs help in doing. So that's cool. That's what you got, And in 7th density, which is not discussed here, 6th is not here. We'll have to go to another time. 7th density, Ross says, the looking backwards is finished, meaning there are very few or there are no wanderers from 7th density, but there are wanderers from 8th, and that's very interesting. Okay, section E, page 11, Ra's spiritual evolution. This is the story of Ra. Their attitude towards human harvest. The question was, do you have a different attitude? Would you have a different attitude towards the unharvestable earth entities, meaning 3D souls who are repeaters, not yet fully polarized or polarized sufficiently for 4D positive or 4D negative? Would you have a different attitude towards them? Not substantially, Ra says. To those who wish to sleep, we could only offer comforts designed for sleeping. Service is only effective, or it's only possible to the extent it is requested. We were ready to serve. We were, which is interesting. We were ready to serve. They're talking about the Egyptians. We were ready to serve in whatever way we could. This still seems satisfactory as a means of dealing with others in 3D. To be each entity which one attempts to serve simplifies one's grasp of what service is necessary and probable, or possible. So, no, they don't have a substantially different attitude towards those who are not harvestable or those who are not actively seeking their own spiritual evolution. Love one, love all. They note, those people will go to another 3rd density planet, and those people have the right to do or not do as they like. And this is the famous quote that I've used a lot. To those who wish to sleep, we can only offer comforts designed for sleeping. So, for those who wish to sleep, we'd only help them to become more comfortable in the sleeping, which is fine, right? It's okay to sleep, which is respectful of their free will, right? If you don't want spiritual information, it's not positively polarized for me to make you hear it. And so the argument, of course, against abduction, genuine alien abduction, ET abduction, as being something positive or in the benefit of humanity, which is what some channels say. In fact, even Bashar, which I don't really respect very much. I listen to some. If you want to hear a funny video, listen to Bashar on Raw on YouTube. I can find it for you. But Bashar on Raw comes off sounding as like a very low fellow. Bashar on the Law of One and the raw material. Why somebody would need Bashar to comment on that is beyond me. But he said many years ago that abduction was for the purpose of helping people wake up, and if we couldn't wake up, it's just our fault, and they don't understand about fear. The Dalai Lama doesn't traumatize anybody in teaching them. And to those who wish to sleep, the most compassionate method of service is to let them sleep or to let them be as they are, which means if people seek little, all we need is to be quietly, kindly, nice to them. That's it. It's enough. And this is an important quote I also have used a lot. Service is only possible to the extent it is requested. And I have changed this to say something like service is effective only to the degree it is requested. Meaning, you can't serve if it's not requested, because the Confederation and all positive service and helping waits for the calling. Await the calling. We were ready to serve in whatever way we could, and it still is satisfactory. And this is another important quote. To be each entity which one attempts to serve simplifies one's grasp of what service is necessary and possible. So if you want to help people or figure out, right, you want to figure out what service is necessary or possible, be each entity. Be the one you attempt to serve. And so, if you want world peace, be peace. I think Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a good teacher, Vietnamese Buddhist, talks about this a lot. Every step, be peace. Now, to really be that is a piece of work. It's not about thinking peaceful thought only. It's not about that. It's about becoming that, which really means transmuting and processing one's anger, or all that is not of peace in the mind, in the heart, of course. And actually that's what we'll be getting into in the future, in the healing and balance material. So Ra's 3D harvest, positive, negative. We had no negative harvest as such, although there had been two entities which had harvested themselves during their 3D in negative or service to self path. There were, however, those upon the planetary surface during third density whose vibratory patterns were in the negative range but were not harvestable. Ra, in section 3 here, Ra tells the story of these wanderers who were from 5th density and ended up harvesting into 4th density negative. This is quite a strange thing. We were a small population which dwelt upon what you would consider difficult conditions. It was very harsh and bright. Our harvest was approximately 6,500,000, with approximately 32 million beings repeating 3D elsewhere. So 6.5 million out of 38.5 million is about a little less than 20%. That's interesting. It's, 15% or something. So that's all. That was considered a very good harmonious harvest, 15%. So God knows what we're going to have here on Earth. 5%? 2%? I don't know. It's worth considering. They were very harmonious. Very. Those of us which had the gift of polarity felt deep compassion for those who seemed to dwell in darkness. This description is most apt, as ours was a harshly bright planet in the physical sense. There was every attempt made to reach out with whatever seemed to be needed on their planet. However, those upon the positive path have the comfort of companions, and we of Ra spent a great deal of our attention upon the possibilities of achieving spiritual or metaphysical adepthood or work an indigo ray through means of relationship with others, specifically sex, sexual tantra, sexual union. And 6th density wanderers who have some connection to Ra often have sexuality in mind as a central, hard to say, central issue or complex or pivot point of consideration. Whether it's harmonious or not, whatever, it's related. And it's interesting, Ra was on Venus, and so, right, the planet of love. But they spent a lot of time in intimate relationship, not only sexual, but in deep communication with each other, very harmonious in love, including sexual tantra, mainly working on adepthood or working indigo ray. So that was pretty, advanced for 3rd density. Consequently, compassion for those in darkness was balanced by the appreciation of light. And I think that's a good advice for how to deal with both the 3D sleepers around us, in our friendships, in our workplace, in our family, in the media, or alerted, shown to us by media and what we read. Compassion for those in darkness, balanced by appreciation of light. It's very lovely, I think. So quickly, I'll just go through this. It's really not that important, but it's an interesting case, and it has ramifications. Story of Ra's 3D wanderers when Ra was in 3D. Mistaken negative harvest of those 2 wanderers. They used the technique of control over others and domination unto the physical death in both cases. These were 2 5th density wanderers. These entities were wanderers from early 5D positive. They switched polarity when they reincarnated into 3rd density. They became negative. An interesting point is, okay, let me finish the paragraph. They used the technique of control over others and domination unto the physical death in both cases. Upon a planetary influence much unused to slaughter, these entities were able to polarize by these means. Upon your 3D environment, such entities would merely be considered ruthless despots waging holy war. Oh well, just another ruthless despot. Ho-hum, I've seen it before. Name your continent. Africa, South America, Latin America, Europe, medieval Europe, Middle East, button-pushing first world military leaders. Technique of control over others. This is a technique of negative polarization. Domination unto death. This is a technique for service to self polarization. This is not by accident. It's not just bloodlust. I mean, it may be, but these are actually techniques by which negative polarization is developed. The catalyst for their change, these 2 wanderers from 5D positive. In our peoples, there was what may be considered from the viewpoint of wisdom an overabundance of love. These entities looked at those still in darkness and saw that those of neutral or somewhat negative viewpoint found such harmony sickening. The wanderers felt a more wisdom-oriented way of seeking love could be more appealing to those in darkness. So they came into Ra's 3rd density cycle to serve those in Ra's 3D group that were not positively oriented doing that adept work. So they felt that the society had an overabundance of love. They looked at those who were not yet positively polarized. They saw, again, those who were neutral or somewhat negative found such harmony sickening. So there were some on Ra's planet that were somewhat negative, and there were those who were neutral, who found harmony sickening. This is like disgust at the sparkles in the hair 11-11-11 crystal dolphin people. Crystal dolphin, angel, joy, dancing around the maypole, New Agers. Sorry, I guess I could find such harmony sickening. But that's not adept work. Adept work is pretty heavy work. And so Ra was not just doing, dance around the maypole, stars in the hair kind of thing. But those who were neutral or somewhat negative found their degree of love sickening. And they were actually naive. And that's an interesting thing. They were actually, and it was shown when they came to Earth, right? They made mistakes, or they got into trouble with what they did with Akhenaten and the pyramid, actually, or it led to a lot of trouble. But the 5D positive entities looked at those in darkness. They saw that those who were not polarized or those who were somewhat negative didn't want that love and might want a more wisdom-oriented teaching to help them move positive. That was the goal. First one entity began its work. Quickly the second found the first. The entities ahead agreed, before the incarnation, to serve together, and so they did, glorifying the one Creator, but not as they intended. About them were soon gathered, so this is another point, right? Glorifying the one Creator by all action. All action is the glorification of the one Creator, with or without love and wisdom. About them were soon gathered those who found it easy to believe that a series of specific knowledges and wisdoms would advance one towards the Creator. The end of this was the graduation into 4D negative of those wanderers who had much power of personality and some small deepening of the negatively polarized element of those not polarizing positively. There was no negative harvest as such, meaning none were 95% STS harvestable. They were indeed incarnated male and female, as this is by far the most efficient system of partnership. Yes. And so the relevant point here is the mistaken view that a series of specific knowledges and wisdoms would advance one towards the Creator. And, it is a little bit like that in some cults, perhaps Scientology, other groups, some channeling or New Age groups, some religious groups, that are teaching that specific knowledge, specific information, right, specific thoughts, ideas, advances one towards the Creator. No, not. What advances towards the Creator is balanced love, wisdom, manifestation in thought, word, and deed. Virtue, wisdom, balance and harmony of benefit to self and other in that which, in the way that is sensitive to the subtlety of service and of moment-to-moment existence, not specific knowledges and information. Before incarnation, it was the desire of these 5D positive wanderers only to aid in service to others. Within the incarnation, however, they wished to seed greater wisdom in what they saw as an overabundance of compassion. That's not what we have on Earth. We have an overabundance of ignorance. But some in the New Age, or some fourth density wanderers, or some spiritual people have an overabundance of compassion. It's more common. It was in the second cycle of 25,000 years. We had a harvest of 6 out of 30, roughly speaking, of millions of mind-body-spirit complexes. Note that that's a little bit different calculation out of the previous, from the previous one that said 6.5 million out of 30, with 32 million repeating. But be it as it may, it's 15 to 20%. Less than 20% wanderers. That's less than 20%, right? That harvest. Wanderers are always drawn to whatever percentage has not yet polarized, and come when there is a call. There was a call from those which were not yet positively polarized as such, but which sought to be positively polarized and sought wisdom, feeling the compassion of others upon Venus, as complacent or pitying towards others. That's interesting. Anyway, those two 5D positive wanderers came in response to the call. And this point is also relevant to us. Wanderers are drawn, always drawn, to whatever percentage is not yet polarized. Hey, here we are. So if Ra's harvest was 15 to 20%, and they were very harmonious, at least a small group was, And here on Earth, it does seem to me that the most people who are harmonious are wanderers. What will the harvest be here? 5%? 2%? Let's be kindly and say 5%. So that means 95% have not yet polarized significantly. So there's certainly a big draw here for wanderers to come here because so many have not yet polarized. So Don asked about these two fifth density wanderers. What happened? How did they feel when they died and went to the middle position? Third density inner planes before their next placement. Ross said they were somewhat disconcerted. I would think so. They were disconcerted after they graduated into 40 negative, and the veil being removed, they realized they had switched polarities. That's a big oh my god. And then they worked with 40 negative for some period until, within the framework of 40 negative, the previously learned patterns of self had been recaptured, and polarity was, with great effort, reversed. This is big trouble. There was a great deal of fourth density positive then to be retraced. So these entities join Ra in fourth density positive for a portion of the cycle we experienced. Maybe Ra was already far advanced in fourth density positive when these fifth density wanderers came back. What a nightmare. So be careful. Be careful. But that's a very telling story. Next week we'll go into the healing and initiation of mind, body, spirit. That's part 1 of the Healing and Balance PDF, which is titled on itself, Principles of the One Infinite Creator. And we'll talk about healing and the law of one, preparing to be a healer, and an introduction to the healer's training. Probably those 3 sections will take us an hour or more. And then we'll get into the training of mind, training of body, training of spirit. This is really the hardcore teachings of initiation. In a general sense, it needs a lot of explanation and commentary beyond my capacity, actually, to be put into practice fully. But I think you'll find it quite interesting. So anyway.